like this. And what will end up happening is this plant will actually start to grow again. And what will end up happening is 3 or more small offshoot stalks will grow from this plant. And what they'll do is they'll choose the healthiest of those stalks, trim off the other 3, okay? And then they'll allow that stalk to once again bloom. And as a result of that, what you'll get is you'll get a much shorter plant with much smaller leaves, but the tobacco will be very, very strong off it. But it is a way to grow a wrapper that you're going to end up getting a lot of potency out of. Yep. Now, there's a downside to that. Even though I'm going to get more money, because I just did it here this year, in the long run, it's pulling a lot more nutrients out of the soil to make that happen. So I'm going to give it, it's going to end up being a sin for next year, because now I'm going to have to make an extra investment in fertilizer and fish meal and lime and phosphate in order to get the field back to where it needs to be. Typically, if someone's going to do, in another term, and I just learned this term the other day, raspado is what they call it here at this farm. And typically, if you do that, then this would be a field that we typically rested the next year. It's almost impossible after taking a capadura crop off it to then replant. Yeah. I mean, can you? Yes, but it's the law of diminishing returns. The more harvests you do off a given field, ultimately you're going to deplete the field, and it's eventually going to need to be retended. And the way we typically what's the word I'm looking for? Not recycle, but revitalize. The typical methodology for revitalizing a field is a 2-step process, sometimes a 1-step, depending on how many years has gone between. But what we'll do is we'll plant legumes in the field. Yeah. Typically the local bean variety that is eaten. Right. Typically in this country it would be like a red bean that would get planted, because the red bean is the one that's right, the frioles. And what they would do is they would allow the workers to harvest the beans on the outside just for their families to eat. But for the most part, the vast majority of the crop, 98% of it, actually just gets tilled 100% back into the soil to give the soil the nutrients of that bean crop. It's one of the more inexpensive fertilizers. The other thing that will happen typically after, and if you're doing, and they'll do that crop, and sometimes every 2 or 3 years, what will end up happening is, in addition to that, you also will move cattle in. Particularly if you're a farmer like Nestor Placencia, who also happens to be a cattle, baron. He has the cows. So rather than paying the money for the fertilizer, he'll just bring cows in to graze on the property for a cycle. So, because it's really very difficult to take the same fields year after year after year. Regretfully though, you are forced to do it because of the limited amount of land, which then dramatically increases your cost of fertilizers.